one of the things I've had kind of disquiet over in terms of the things I've been thinking about is, what I perceive to be a kind of mismatch between some ideas that I'm intrigued with to do with intentionality and some other ideas that I'm intrigued with to do with kind of non-duality, but also to do with various philosophies that stress the kind of illusory nature of intentionality. I guess, sort of. I'm thinking about Heidegger onwards, really. So I'm not absolutely sure my facts on that. But certainly in terms of intentionality, from what I know about it, it's a kind of post-Cartesian hang-up or paradigm to do with a subject in relation to an object. And we as active subjects, agents, have active relationships to objects. And that relationship is, broadly speaking, one of intentionality. There's an aboutness to my experience. And my aboutness, the aboutness of my experience, originates in my subjectivity and terminates in the objects of my perception and experience. So I'm looking at my dog. The act of looking begins with me as the subject, the looker, and ends in the dog, the looker. And the flow of intentionality derives from that. As I say, it seems to be a kind of Cartesian thing, but it also figures in Husserl, I believe, and I think it's also part of Brentano's writings, this idea of intentionality. And it seems to keep appearing in different forms in lots of different readings I've done, in quite unexpected places sometimes. I made reference to a video that, what's it called? The guy who wrote Boomeritis and Theory of Everything or something. Ken, I'll come back to Ken something. He does this talk on Descartes, and which I think I've mentioned, in which he talks about the relationship between Brahman and the world. And he says, the world is an illusion, only Brahman is real, Brahman is the world. It's that kind of Vedanta kind of relationship. But even within that, which seems to be about the dismissing of intentionality, kind of builds intentionality into it. There is this kind of motion, and he gestures in this way when he does this talk, that it keeps coming back to the self or Brahman or the subject in some way. It keeps being positive, even if it's only as a temporary measure in order to move past it. It still seems to keep featuring. So that idea of intentionality is one of the things I'm thinking about, and also in how it features within our embodiment. And here I'm drawing on Drew Leder extensively. I think his book The Absent Body is really interesting in that regard. He talks a lot about this sense that we have of our intentions flowing out of ourselves, walking ahead of us on the road. And it features in our language. We look towards something, and we look at as if there's a kind of a projectile moving from ourselves towards the aptness of our gaze. So I think this intentionality features a lot in that. But as I say, I have some disquiet with that, because it doesn't marry up terribly well. It hasn't in my thinking in the past, at least. It hasn't married up terribly well to post-Husserlian, post-Brentano ideas to do with non-duality, to do with that sense in Heidegger he talks about being in the world, and in Merleau-Ponty as well, actually, where there's this sense in which the world and the being in it are unitary. There's no distinction between the world and the being. They kind of mutually arise, are self-dependent, hang off one another, and intentionality just doesn't really feature terribly well on that. I think Heidegger brings it back in through a consideration of anxiety, but I'm not absolutely sure about that. So what's the score with all that? I mean, the only way I'm thinking about it, and this is so cursory it's almost not worth talking about, is that to the extent that I'm thinking about intentionality, and I'm kind of imagining projectiles of intention flowing out of myself towards the world, and I'm kind of imagining myself my intention preceding me along this walk, having a kind of prehensile relationship to the future. Those kind of understandings of intention, those ideas are themselves, it seems to me, concepts, objects of thought. So if I can take a kind of meta view of that in configuring my intentionality in the ways that I am configuring it, which is to do with kind of rays of light or objects flying ahead of me on the road, or rays streaming out of my eyes towards the object, or my ears kind of reaching out to pick up sound. That is itself a construct, and I'm inventing that. So it just features as part of the landscape of the world. It's another part of the being that's in the world. And the fact that I can give it a name like intentionality displays its symbolic and explicit nature, even though it's one that I happen to be to figure in a certain way.